All right. Hello and welcome everyone once again to the Sutron Global webinar. We'll be getting started now. And of course, the session is recorded. So if anybody joins us a little late, don't worry, they'll be able to get a recording of it. All right. So as you know, we're here for the Mining Enterprise Business Intelligence, another role for InfoPros with Deb Hunt. We have today with us, of course, Michael Hughes, who's coming to us from London, UK, myself, Tanya Anderson, and I'm coming from Vancouver, BC, and of course, I just mentioned it, but our guest speaker coming from California. So Michael, if you wouldn't take it away.
Sure, thanks, Tanya. Thanks everybody for joining us. Just a very brief introduction for those of you that are new to this webinar series and don't know too much about Sutron. Sutron Global essentially is a cloud-based library, knowledge and information management solution provider dedicated to managing library transformation and helping InfoPros deal with whichever challenges they're faced, whether that's delivery of information in the digital age, as we now find ourselves, or managing relics or artifacts from times of long gone. We are able to help them do all of that. And as you see on the next slide, examples of some of the solutions we provide that allow them to do that and allow us to help them do so. So we have at our core the library information management system. We also have the discovery platform now available for one-stop shop of your digital on all of your online repositories, subscription and e-databases, as well as I mentioned there earlier, capability for managing archive, whether that's a corporate archive or something a little bit more older and of a greater age. And we also have solutions around KM, digital asset management, as well as skills. So if anybody would like to have a little bit more information about that initiative that we are currently promoting and we have available, this webinar is a part of that, one small part of it. There are other elements. We are also offering financial assistance to InfoPros that attend these sessions and that have an interest in adopting any of those solutions that we saw on the previous screen there. So if anybody would like more information about that, again, on the next slide, we will have more information about how you can reach out to us, how you can find us on social media. So that's giving you a little bit of background about who we are, hopefully, and also the initiative that we're running right now. And I'd say part of that initiative is this series of educational webinars, which we're very excited to put on for people and give back at this time and provide access to trusted industry experts and third-party consultants. So without too much further ado, let me hand you back to Tanya, who will introduce our particular speaker for today. It's a great session and we're looking forward to this one. Back to you, Tanya. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. All right, so as you all know, I'm sure, we have Deb Hunt with us. She is a past SLA president and is currently the library director of the Mechanics Institute. So without further ado, Deb, please take it away.
Hi there, everybody. I'm excited to be here today. And I'm excited to know that there's folks from all over the world here. We're going through a tough time, so I hope that take your mind off the pandemic for a bit to talk about some of the opportunities we have as librarians and information professionals and thinking about ways that we can contribute in our current positions or other positions out there or as consultants. So go ahead and let's go to the next slide, please, Tanya. All right, so what we're going to talk about today is what's in it for me, or really what's in it for you, and what's in it for your employer, a future employer and or clients. And we're going to talk about this alphabet soup of different acronyms and how we can use those in the jobs that we do and how they can make our lives easier and the lives of our employers easier as well, or use it as a consultant. And we're going to talk a little bit about intellectual capital and also turning information into strategic knowledge. So I hope this will be an informative session that will provide a foundation on how to think about all that information that is worth so much, yet is often buried and inaccessible. So next slide, please. All right, so we were going to do a live poll, but it turns out GoToWebinar won't let us do what we wanted. So Michael, thank you for doing this ahead of time. Not all of you had an opportunity to participate, but we had a pretty good return actually we had 100% return on those who were polled. And so these were some questions, and I want you to think about this. You know, I have been laid off twice in my career, and it was a horrible feeling. You do question your self-worth, but generally it's an economic thing and not a personal thing. Um, I know quite a few colleagues and family members who have been laid off since the pandemic started. So we asked the second question, have you been laid off in the last year? And then we asked also about those of you that are still working, are you feeling secure in your job? There's a lot of uncertainty in the world right now. And then I always ask this question. I am a past president of the Special Libraries Association, and I hope that you are all active in your associations, because I can tell you that almost all of my consulting work, I would say 100% of my consulting work, has come through networking through SLA and the Association of Independent Information Professionals, not because I have a website or anything like that, but because I've either learned from colleagues or taught colleagues and have gotten to know them through professional associations. So you have to remember, we can't wait for the jobs to come to us. We must be out there networking, and we can do that virtually now, thank goodness. We need to be active in professional associations, and we need to continually upgrade our skill set. And by attending this webinar, you are demonstrating a couple of these actions, and perhaps all of them if you are active in your professional associations. And for those of you in jobs now, we're gonna do the poll, and then we're gonna have a question, and I hope there can be a little bit of a chat. So let's look at the poll results, please. All right. So I was shocked, to be honest with you, at question 2, like how many of you been laid off in the last year? 90% of the respondents said they had not, and which is amazing, actually over 90%. So it was very few people. So that is really good news in this pandemic era that we are in. And it was great too to see that most respondents feel really secure in their jobs. That's a great thing, because, but I have to tell you, never feel overly secure in your job. I've done things that have saved organizations I was an employee at a lot of money, and still my job was eliminated. So remember to never be too complacent in your security in your job. And I was really delighted to see that most of the respondents were also active in their professional association, which is great. And I encourage you to be active and not passive. It really does pay off. So Michael, I'm throwing you a curve here, but I'm curious, for those of you in jobs now, what is your biggest concern as far as job security goes? And I was hoping you could type that into the chat.
Sure, will do. Bear with me, let me just go ahead and do that. If anybody wants to go ahead and respond to that immediately, we do have a questions section normally to the right side of your screen on the GoToWebinar panel. So please feel free to send us a response through there, or just go ahead and use the chat facility. Yeah, right now we don't have anything there. But, as soon as anybody wants to go ahead and respond to Deb, then please do so. Feel free to do so.
Okay. I am going to count to 10 to myself and to see if anybody responds. I always do that.
Here we go, we got one.
Okay.
We got one. So we've got the volatility of the economy, not knowing any time what could happen.
Yeah, that is a concern, right? And I think we have to all be prepared that we may not have a job next week, next month, next year. We know this pandemic is going to go on for a while, and it is devastating economically, really around the world. And I think we need to prepare. So coming to this webinar is one thing, and I'm going to give you some tips about how to be better prepared as well. And one of the things I've talked about in past webinars is we need to shout from the rooftops the value that we bring to our organizations. We need to let our stakeholders know, those who hold the keys to the budgets. And I know we're all getting a lot of pressure to economize during this time. But again, you want to make sure that your employer, your boss, those who are in control of the budget know the value that you bring to the organization. That is so important. Don't assume that anybody knows.
Right, and I got another one here for you, Deb.
Okay.
Someone else is very new to their organization, but they've already heard mention of there being financial issues within that particular organization. So obviously a concern there for that person.
Yes, yes, and that is a valid concern. I think even like the Mechanics Institute, which has been around since 1854 and survived the end of the gold rush, survived the 1906 huge earthquake and fires in San Francisco, and the 1918 pandemic. And here we are again in another pandemic. And we worry too, because we're a membership organization, and some people can't afford to pay their dues right now. So I think those are valid concerns. Are there any others? Any other comments? If not, we'll go on.
I think that's it for the moment. Oh no,
Okay,
there's
well,
one
and
more
we
come
can,
through. Let me just get you one more if I
okay,
may.
fine,
Yeah,
absolutely.
the uncertainty around duration of the recession.
Yeah, yes. And I know the housing economy, at least in California, where I am in California, in the San Francisco Bay Area, is still very robust, amazingly enough. But they are prophesying that it is not going to stay that way, that the forecast is that the bottom is going to drop out. So that's a scary thing as well. All right, thank you for participating. We'll have more time for questions at the end and comments as well. So can we go on to the next slide, please? So what is this alphabet soup here that we're talking about? We have enterprise content management, document management, digital asset management, records management, and records and information management, as well as knowledge management and knowledge services. All of these have to do with leveraging information in an organization to make it refindable and reusable, thus saving time and money and lots of frustration. Some of these also have to do with version control, records life cycles, retention schedules, and security, but there are differences in them, and I'll explain them in the next slides. So as I share more, please keep in mind that information is cheap and knowledge is priceless. So this is a definition that aim.org had on their website. I haven't been able to find it. I went and looked for it again, but it's about what is enterprise content management. And this is a very broad, over-encompassing strategy and initiative that one does throughout an organization. So it's the strategies, methods, and tools used to capture, manage, store, preserve, and deliver content and documents, and that content can be digital or analog, related to organizational processes. So there's tools and strategies that allow the management of an organization's unstructured information, no matter where that information exists. So if you think of federated search, and I'll say that Amazon does not have federated search. They have a horrible search engine if you've ever tried to drill down. Those of you that remember Zappos, which was a great online shoe vendor, they had a really good federated search engine. So if you don't know what federated search, it's a way to drill down. There's faceted search, a lot of different things. But if you think of federated search, that's a really good way to understand enterprise content management. It's much larger and more encompassing than document management or digital asset management, as it tries to be inclusive of all the information streams in an organization, as well as business processes and workflow. ECM includes digital and print documents, files, images, and more that we can reuse and repurpose to do our work, so we don't reinvent the wheel every time we start a project, prepare a presentation, write a report, that sort of thing. That's what makes it so valuable, is repurposing content. It's the same for our clients or users. Money, time, and effort are saved every time we can refind and reuse content, and a lot of frustration and time is also avoided. So it's really important to think about, how do we find that stuff we know we own or is somewhere in our organizational repository, but we just can't get our hands on it. And sometimes ECM is also referred to, and I would say more frequently now, is Intelligent Information Management, or IIM. That's Intelligent Information Management. So that's the first of our alphabet soups. Let's go to the next one. And this is, we're going to talk about document management, which is the process of managing documents through their life cycle, from inception through creation, then review, storage, and dissemination, all the way to destruction. And I have to say the lines have really blurred in the last 6 years or so between DAM, digital asset management, document management, and records management, especially as more has become automated. But again, it's really important to remember that the system that you have is only as good as the foundation that you've created. So whether you're doing enterprise content management, document management, digital asset management, records management, you need a taxonomy and you need a metadata schema. Yes, there's AI, artificial intelligence, and other ways to harvest information from your assets, but really having a taxonomy and a metadata schema is what makes us valuable, because we know how to do that, or we can learn how to do that, and also because it makes the information findable. So it's Google versus an information professional who's making the assets findable in ways that knowledge workers can get at them to use them in their work. Okay, let's go on to the next one for digital asset management. And this consists of the management tasks and decisions surrounding the ingestion, annotation, cataloging, storage, retrieval, and distribution of digital assets. As we know, more and more documents and other things like images are being born digital, and managing an organization's digital assets has become a discipline all unto itself. When I talk about ingestion, just so you know, you probably know what that means, but in case you don't, I'll give you an example. So architectural firms often have a photographer on staff. And this photographer, when a firm is either writing a proposal to get work or working on a project, they will often send a photographer out into the built environment to look for things like curbs, think about street curbs, or water features. Those could be fountains, they could be cascading waterfalls, all in the built environment, or maybe even in nature as well, that they might emulate in the built environment. And this photographer will go out now with a digital camera, and they might shoot 500, 1,000 images on one day's shoot, and they come back into the office or from their home and they download all of those images onto the server at the organization, at the architectural firm. And unfortunately, at that point, probably 90% of those images should be deleted. Well, not at that point. Somebody later, like us, a curator, would delete 90% of those images because maybe they weren't in focus, or they're duplicates or triplicates of other ones that were already taken. But they're pulled into whatever server or repository that firm has, and that's what ingestion is. I talked a lot about DAM in more detail in the Sutron Global June 2nd webinar entitled Those DAM Librarians, and that's available on Sutron Global's website. So if you want to dive a little deeper into DAM, that's a great place to do that. Okay, next slide, please. So I want to talk about RM and RIM. So records management and records and information management. And really it's the systematic control of records throughout their life cycle. And this is really efficient and systematic control of the creation, receipt, maintenance, use, and disposition of records, and all the processes for how these are captured, how they're maintained. And ARMA, the quote that's here describing what RM and RIM is, you probably know, is the Association of Records Managers and Administrators. So remember that records come in many formats. I've already alluded to that. Physical papers in our files, memos, contracts, marketing materials, reports. Then there's things like electronic messages, email, their attachments, instant messages, Slack, that sort of thing. There's content on a website, on an intranet. There's documents that reside on our tablets, on our desktop computers, on servers, and in document management systems. And there's also information captured in the organization's various databases. Records management and RAM come with their own set of rules and legal issues governing the management of these internal documents. And learning the language and principles of RM can really open up vast new opportunities for information professionals. I encourage you to look up ARMA. And if you're interested in going into this, there are local chapters, I believe, all over the world. I've gone to meetings here in the San Francisco Bay Area and learned a lot. I've not done any records management projects unless they've been as standalone, unless they've been folded into a broader document management project or ECM project. But often there are regulations about what must be kept. Think about accounting records must be kept if you're in the United States for at least 7 years plus the current year. That sort of thing. So there's a lot of rules and regulations around this versus the other things that I've been talking about. But the local chapters are a great way to network with other people. Once we can meet in person, I know they're having virtual programming and meetings now, but that's a great way to learn more about RM and RIM. And then let's go to the next slide and we'll finish up our alphabet soup about KM and KS, so knowledge management and knowledge services. And this is a great definition from CIO.com that it's the process, and this is talking about KM, the process through which organizations generate value from their intellectual and knowledge-based assets. And generating value from such assets really involves codifying what employees, partners, customers know and sharing that information amongst them and even amongst departments and across silos. We probably all work in organizations that are somewhat siloed, where information and knowledge is not shared across departments or divisions or even physical locations. And that's where KM really comes in. And as Guy St. Clair, who is the godfather of knowledge management and knowledge services, says that knowledge services is putting KM to work. And so it's taking it to the next level. All right, let's go on to the next one. I want to talk a little bit about intellectual capital. And so there's relational capital, which is all the relations that an organization entertains with external subjects, their suppliers, their partners, their clients. Think about the brands that you know that I bet most of us can think of about a particular brand that we know, and we know their tagline, maybe like Nike, like just do it, or we know a song that's or music that's connected to somebody or a person that's connected to that brand. That's really great intellectual capital because it's stuck to and we recognize it. Human capital is really the stuff that's in our brains. It's the stuff that we know. And when somebody leaves an organization, a ton of human capital walks out the door. That's why exit interviews are really important in capturing the intellectual or human capital that is in somebody's brain before they leave. And then there's organizational capital, which is that collective know-how. It's beyond the capabilities of individual employees. It might be a department or a division or a group within the organization that knows the history of the organization, and that can come into play. And I'll give a really quick example of that. Those of you who are in SLA, there's been a discussion lately about where are all the archives for all the different, what are now called communities, but were divisions and chapters. And what's been wonderful is to see the responses like, well, we know that the transportation division archives are located here, or we know that they're located there. And so this is intellectual capital. This is from the community is coming together to provide the knowledge base for where all these archives live, because they're not in one place. They're in many distributed places. So just to summarize about intellectual capital is it's what lives in people's brains. It may not be in any tangible form, written, illustrated, or otherwise, but it's really based on a person's expertise and experience. And for me, I'll give you an example. When I was a hospital librarian many years ago, and also an engineering consultant for an engineering firm that had a library, and we were also doing document management for them. I used to, as I walked around, which I always recommend you get up from your desk and walk around and see what people are doing, when that's physically possible. And I would hear these hallway conversations, and I would often remind, everybody knew me. I always made sure that I talked to people, whether it was virtually or in person. And these engineers would often be standing in the hall, and they'd be discussing a highway overpass, for example, and that they were designing. And I would hear them talk about something, and then I'd remind them and say, you haven't come to the library for a while, or you haven't called or emailed me or texted me to let me know that you need some research done on that, because from what I'm hearing, it sounds like you're talking about old regulations. You need to make sure you're using the most recent ones. Something very simple, and yet this happens quite a lot. I would often hear physicians or nurses talking in the hallway at the hospital, and I would remind them, you know, that might not be the latest information. There might be some new drugs for that. So we need to continually use our intellectual capacity to help others to realize they need to go beyond the intellectual capital that they have, that their ideas may not be as up to date as they think they are. So anyway, this is another way for us to be very valuable and invaluable in our organizations, and to let our stakeholders know that we have a repository of knowledge and information that they can have access to, and that we'll be there, we'll work with them to get that latest, best information that's vetted to them. For me, also, intellectual capital, as I mentioned, means tapping into my community. Talked about the SLA archives. There's also the knowledge management community. There's many different communities at SLA and in other organizations. And AIIP, the Association of Independent Information Professionals, has an amazing listserv that is open only to members. And I have asked more questions there and learned so much from responses from others, other members to questions that are on that listserv. And another place that we should all be active in is LinkedIn. That has allowed me to learn from and contribute to discussions with people and colleagues I probably would never have connected with in the non-virtual world. So remember that human capital doesn't exist just in more structured organizations such as a law firm or a university, but it can exist anywhere, and we have opportunities to tap into that. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So we know that it just seems like exponentially data and information are growing, and we have two choices. We can maintain the status quo and hope that employees can find relevant information and knowledge to do their work, or we can utilize asset organization and search technology to connect knowledge workers with the information and knowledge they need to do their work with the least amount of frustration and time. Smart organizations recognize the value of knowledge sharing and access to assets in all of their forms, whether it's print, digital, intellectual capital. And those are the organizations that are going to survive the current economic crisis that we are in. And we can play a major role in that. So that's all for me. I have one more slide to just say to please join me for part 2 of this webinar, where I'm going to share 2 case studies and some tips for moving your career in a different direction in one of these areas. So now we're open for questions. Thank you for being here today and listening. I look forward to hearing your questions and hopefully being able to answer them.
Oh, thank you so much, Deb. Interesting, that whole alphabet soup. Deciphering, and I'm certainly looking forward to the case studies next time. If anybody would like to take the opportunity to ask Deb a question, please do so. There is that option on the screen there for you. Let me kick off with one that's come through for you right here.
Okay.
Deb, it's let me just get the screen in front of me. You talked about possibility of pursuing alternate career paths. What kind of resources are available for info pros interested in following a different path?
Okay, that's a great question. So a couple of things. I'm the chair this year of well, now I'm not the chair. We've changed from divisions to communities. I'm the president of the KM community for SLA. And I love that community because you can ask any question in the Connect community and colleagues will come back. There's an open community on SLA where questions get asked and answered. There's the Leadership and Management Development community, LMD. There are so many communities within SLA, and I know CILIP also has them. There's just so many resources that are out there. And in these slides, when you do get a copy of the slides, I cite like AIIM has great, .org has great resources. The arma.org has great resources. There's a lot of good places to go. Some are fee-based, a lot of them are free. Stan Garfield has some amazing KM resources. Guy St. Clair is a great place to go. There are just so many. I think what I would recommend is think about what resonates with you, what interests you in the things that I've talked about, or maybe do a little bit of exploring at some of those different websites. And then think about either in your current position, is there a way to expand your role? And I know most of us feel like we're already very busy, but as I always my advice always is let go of the stuff nobody else cares about and think about ways that you can expand into these other areas that will be tangible in results and ROI for your organization. So, and there are programs. I mean, there are KM programs, there's certificate programs. There's a lot of stuff out there. And I didn't put it here. Maybe I'll put it on the end of my next presentation. The Librarian Skill Book that I co-wrote with David Grossman also has a whole way about how you can learn new skills. And we go through all of these different areas as well as many others, and how you can create a personal roadmap to move to other areas in your career.
Thank you, Deb. Someone else has come through with a question. My organization's eyes glaze over when I use these acronyms, but when I speak librarian and place them in that life cycle, the organization more easily understands. How do I bring their heads into the 21st century? There's one for you.
Okay, that's a great question. And I am all about storytelling. So if you don't have a story to tell, reach out to your colleagues on the listservs of your professional organizations and ask them if they have a story that you could share that would resonate as an example of, here's how our competitor, or here's how another organization is using KM. And you could tell a story. And when Dale Stanley and I used to teach and Guy St. Clair, the KMKS courses for SLA, we always said you need a 30-second pitch, a 3-minute pitch, a 5-minute pitch, and if you get past that, like a 20-minute pitch when you're going to actually give a formal presentation, because you're right, people's eyes do glaze over. So you have to have something catchy that is going to get them to go, I need to know more about this because this is going to benefit the organization. And so I always remind them that information is cheap and knowledge is priceless, and how it contributes to the bottom line of the organization. And there are some statistics. I haven't seen updated ones that show, boy, I have to see if I could get my hands on that again. And you may be able to do a search for this, how much time knowledge workers, which all of us are basically today, spend trying to find the information and the knowledge they need to do their work. And if it were well organized, they could spend more time in the giving back to the organization, the ROI mode, instead of the searching for the information that lets them get to that ROI mode. I hope that makes sense, but we spend a lot of time looking for information, right? So that we can then produce something from that into knowledge that will bring a benefit to the organization that we're a part of. And we want to spend less time doing the finding and more time taking what we found and molding it into something that will resonate with our organization and increase its profitability, even if it's a nonprofit. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love the storytelling aspect and the different length pitches. Thank you, Deb. So, someone's also asking about they need to organize both their professional and their personal print and electronic assets, I guess.
Yeah.
It's quite a clear question. It says, where do I start?
It's funny that you say that, because so I have, this whole universe of the Mechanics Institute, and then have this Information Edge universe, and then I have my own, and then plus my professional, volunteering work that I do as well. And it's like, how, where's their duplication? I'm always looking for that. I highly recommend a great little, let's see if I'm gonna get out of the full screen mode here, if it's gonna let me for a minute. There's a great duplicate detection software program that I highly recommend. It's free. And if you want the more sophisticated stuff, you can pay for it. It's called Duplicate File Finder. I highly recommend it. That's a great place to start. You will be, and you can have it do little things like find everything with the same file name, or maybe the same file name, and only keep the most recent. It lets you look at them before it will delete them. But that's often a good start, because it's amazing what we have just at home on a hard drive, and backed up into the cloud. So I would start there. And then cleaning out email. I'm a big fan of Getting Things Done, the book, and I've tried to follow those. I don't do very well every day, but I try to. And that's helped me to keep my inbox not overwhelming, because email, as we know, is a taskmaster. We're kind of enslaved to it. And that's a whole other area that needs organization. But get rid of the stuff you don't need anymore, that nobody cares about. That's what I say. But keep priceless family heirloom things. Don't get rid of those. Those are wonderful. They're usually one of a kind.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Deb. Let me. There are no more coming through right now, so we'll take
Okay.
the opportune moment to just thank you, Deb, and I'll pass it back over to Tanya just to finish us off here. Thank you, Tanya.
Thanks very much, and thank you everyone for joining us. If you'd like to find out when the next session is, we're going to be planning it for August 11th, same time. And so we'll be posting that on all of our social media very shortly, as well as we'll be sending everybody out an email so they can join us for part 2. Of course, thank you for everything. And if you want any extra info, please visit us at sutronglobal.com for our knowledge services blog, news, and all that more. If you need any additional information for our COVID-19 program, as Deb said, and as everybody's kind of identified lately, it's a little strange right now. And so if you're struggling or you need some help, please feel free to reach out to us. So
And I
thank
want to
you
thank
again.
you. And
Yes,
thank
go
you
ahead, Deb.
everybody for being here. And thank you Sutron Global and Tanya and Michael and Tony for letting me talk to my colleagues today. It was really fun.
Our pleasure. Thank you, Deb. So thank you, everyone. We'll see you next time on August 11th, and take care of yourselves till then.